we've seen a lot of that incredibly odd reversal. And, well, it's very hard to know what to make of that, except that, well, the evidence is starkly in, isn't it? It's happening. RFK is an excellent example of that. Tulsi Gabbard, turfed by the Democrats. And then, I mean, the Trump administration is run by Democrats, essentially. The courageous Democrats who were turfed from their own party now run the United States under the guise of Republicans in conjunction with Trump.
Yeah.
Well, like, who's going to predict that? Well, I guess you think, well, the last won't be first. It's, well, yeah, I guess they will.
How do I possibly do a Jordan Peterson interview in 10 minutes at the end of ARC, my last interview, your last interview? You're about to give the keynote. We got 10 minutes. How do we do this? What do we do?
Badly and quick, I guess.
What are you going to talk about in 10 minutes from now?
I'm going to talk about hardly anything. I'm going to talk about Noah, Moses, Abraham, and adventure. And hopefully I'm going to pull that off to some music. We'll see how that goes.
Are you going to be playing some music?
No, there's an orchestra.
I saw the orchestra. I could see a little Jordan Peterson conducting of something.
Yeah, I've got my cues.
This is a fine mess you've gotten yourself in.
That's for sure. That's for sure. That's the purpose of life, Dave, is to get yourself in fine messes. Oh, how's that going for you?
It's going pretty well, but
there you go.
But I don't know that it's going at the level you're going at. I mean,
well, get the hell at it.
All right, I'm working on it.
You're not doing too bad.
No, I'm doing all right.
You're fired on at least 6 cylinders.
How many are there?
That's a good question. There's an infinite number of potential cylinders, unfortunately.
I like that. I like that. So I have to say that one of the things that's been most interesting about this conference compared to the one a year and a half ago is that one was the end of October of 23. It was right after October 7th. Yeah. And there was a feeling, despite all of the good ideas of the conference, there was a feeling of dread for everybody in the West. Like, is this really all falling apart? Yeah. Now it's a year and a half later, not even. And we're just weeks after a Trump presidency where there's a feeling of hope here. Yeah. And that's been making me think, boy, an awful lot can change in a year and a half. And that's probably, you can probably give me a biblical version of that.
Yeah, well, things fall quickly and they can rise quickly. And how do we make sense out of what's happened with Trump? Well, what would we might say about that? The last will be first. How about that? Who's head of NIH? Jay Bhattacharya.
Yes, not bad.
Right.
It's going to happen. It's
like
going to happen.
From an epidemiologist whose career was threatened with serious cancellation, who was pilloried terribly. Now he's going to run the NIH by all appearances. And we've seen a lot of that incredibly odd reversal. And, well, it's very hard to know what to make of that, except that, well, the evidence is starkly in, isn't it? It's happening. RFK is an excellent example of that. Tulsi Gabbard, turfed by the Democrats. And then, I mean, the Trump administration is run by Democrats, essentially. The courageous Democrats who were turfed from their own party now run the United States under the guise of Republicans in conjunction with Trump. Yeah. Well, like, who's going to predict that? Well, I guess you think, well, the last won't be first. It's, well, yeah, I guess they will.
So at your opening speech, you were basically giving the story of Passover. It was the story of Exodus, of the Jews leaving Egypt to go to the Promised Land. And you were talking about the, what did you call them? There were the 12 tribes, but there were the people that went in first. Yeah. What did you refer to them as?
Scouts of the future.
Scouts of the future.
Yeah.
I was thinking as you were talking about that seems to me to be some of these people that Trump has brought in. Trump sort of brought us all out of Egypt. And now he's sending the scouts to go look and figure out, what do you have to do? How do we do all of this? I mean, it really is beautiful when these stories can make some congruence.
Well, one of the interesting things about that story is the insistence that you have a moral obligation to be optimistic about the future. And the future is akin to the present. It will be occupied by many of the same people. It's rife with formidable and even apocalyptic challenges. And that's always the case. And the question then is, what's the appropriate moral attitude in the face, even truly, of a potential apocalypse? And the answer to that always is faith, courage, and the optimism that springs from faith and courage and that isn't naive. You're required to do that morally. that's, in some ways, that's even the defining characteristic of faith. And so what does that mean? It means what Caleb and Joshua do report to Moses when they're sent to Canaan to scout out the future. They say, well, it's a place of formidable challenge, but if we maintain our upward aim and our covenant with the divine, then there's no desert we can't make bloom. And I think that's right. I also think that's the right rejoinder to the Malthusians, even from a biological perspective. Their notion is it's a zero-sum game and we'll multiply till we consume all possible resources. And the rejoinder to that is human beings transform the idea of resource itself, and the future is a place of unlimited possibility if you maintain your upward aim. I think that's true. And so if it's true, you're called upon to be a forthright and optimistic scout of the future. And then you're the people who lead the lost to the promised land. And yes, that seems correct.
Do you feel that your life is actually completely congruent with what you just said there? Because that's what I was thinking when I was watching you give that speech. I've seen you do this a million times, and I'll see you do it a million more times, and I'll see you put order into the world. But you've done it. You are doing it by putting truth into the world. We met 10 years ago, and you were a little-known psychology professor, and I was a little-known podcaster. And look at what has happened here.
Yeah, well, completely congruent. That's it. That never happens, I would say, because the dimensions of congruence become more complex and the requirement for congruence becomes greater as you ascend, so to speak, as your obligations multiply. The price you pay for making a mistake increases, and the level of commitment that you have to bring to bear on the problems increases. And I don't think there's a limit to that. And so,
do you feel that? Do you feel that on a daily basis, or is it just
well, you know that the cost for mistakes multiplies, the amount of attention that you have to bring to bear increases because the cost of failure is higher and higher, and the standards become higher and higher. And so that congruence is a constant pursuit rather than a permanent attainment, and it's always in error. I mean, part of the reason you fortify yourself in relationship to that is to surround yourself with people who are also helpful and awake. You know, and I have a lot of good people on my team.
Yeah.
My wife is very helpful. My kids, my security staff, all the agents that work with me, you know, they're always reminding me and tapping me and making sure that everything's on track. And so far that's going well, but it's not like I would ever presume to assume that that's a fait accompli, right? It's like surfing. It's like surfing. There's a balance there, but you're still in the waves and you better watch the hell out.
Do you feel that there are threshold moments throughout that where you feel like, oh, well, now I've accomplished this or reached this level or something, and now I won't turn back in that sense, and now I can just grow from here? You know, that you'll just continually grow.
No, I wouldn't say I feel that. I think you have to maintain that underlying awareness of fragility. I think that's also part of gratitude. When things are going well, you have to remember how unlikely that is. You know, when Tammy has been accompanying me on stage a lot, and I don't know, she's probably opened 100 times now, and she's got to be a pretty good, maybe even a very good public speaker. And one of the enabling factors that make that possible is the cultivation of the right attitude towards the crowd. The music helps because we have a musician that plays before our lectures, but we're always trying to remind ourselves, and it's the same with this convention, this is very unlikely. You should never take it for granted, even for a second. It's the same when people approach you on the street and they want to talk to you. You know, you don't want to be dismissive. You don't want to ever be above that. Maybe you have to speed along because you have a priori commitment, but you want to not. Part of that religious humility is not taking anything for granted and realizing that there's 1,000 ways to fail and success is unlikely. And if it happens to be visiting you now, you should be very, very cognizant of that and aware of it. People often believe that if a miracle occurred, they would now be a dedicated follower of the divine.
Right.
And that's not right.
Maybe for 5 minutes.
Yeah, maybe. What's right is that there's miracles happening in front of you all the time. And if you were awake, you'd see that. And maybe that would bolster your faith. And my sense is that if you're speaking to a multitude and they're not throwing stones at you, then you bloody well better be pretty happy about that, because it could be seriously otherwise. And so at the moment, there's many things happening in my life that are insanely positive. The Peterson Academy is flourishing. We have 50,000 students. My kids are doing well. The public response, as it is at ARC, is very positive, and there's sort of there's an unlimited horizon of opportunity in front of me. But by the same token, you're a fool to take any of that for granted, and you want to be awake and dancing the whole time. And it's also extremely entertaining, right? I mean, It's ridiculously engrossing and interesting. And
well, now I want to see what you're going to do with the orchestra up there. And I'm really glad, and just personally, I'm really glad to hear you say that, because this is incredible what you have built here. It is genuinely incredible, and I think it's changing the world for the better. And this is just a perfect example of everything you've been building. And now you got to go give a big speech. So this was the 10-minute Jordan Peterson. I didn't really have to do much.
It's good to see you, Dave. Thanks for coming to London, man, and thanks for your help.
Yeah.
Yep. Good to see you.
If you're looking for more eye-opening and worldly conversations, make sure to dive into our international playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a wide variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.
We are in dire straits in England and Britain, but things can be turned around. I think, one of the big issues we're facing, I mentioned immigration. There's a problem of the relations between Muslims and non-Muslims in this country. And, but that's not, part of that problem is that we are, there's the kind of a liberal progressive two-tier approach to justice. So where I'm hopeful is I look to, let's say, Singapore, I look to the Emirates and the Saudis, who have, Singapore has 20% Muslim population. The Saudis and the Emirates, obviously Muslim majority countries, but they're very outspoken about how to deal with Islamism. In Britain, Islamism is a serious problem. 1 in 100 British Muslims are on a MI5 jihadi watch list. Something like 95 people have been killed by Islamists since 95, I think. 2005. And we've got a lot of issues with those groups mixing. But I think if we take law and order seriously, we get rid of two-tier system, we actually punish perpetrators and people start respecting the law, then we might actually have social cohesion come again.
So Winston Marshall, you just said something interesting off camera. Hopefully you can repeat it on camera, that you think of yourself or you identify as British, not English. From an American perspective, I don't think anyone would know what that means.
English, not British.
English, not British. You see?
But English over British. So I do identify as British, but English primarily. Even though I'm not entirely ethnically English, I'm a real mutt, of Euro mutt. But let's just give a bit of context for listeners.
Yeah.
We're at ARC, Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. One of the debates being had both on and off stage is that what is the story we tell ourselves? What is the identity? And then outside of ARC, why this is such an important question for Britain is because mass migration, illegal and legal, is probably the most important issue of the day. And so we have quite literally millions coming every year, or up to 1 million, let's say, has been, over 1 million some years gross of migrants coming to the country. And there's conversations about, we've seen social disunity, we've seen social cohesion crumbling, we've seen different groups separating. Parts of London you'd have had to drive through, Whitechapel, where the signs aren't even English anymore, and so English is not even the first language in a lot of the country. So the conversation has been had of who we are, how are we to tell people who are moving here what to integrate into, what to assimilate into, if we ourselves cannot identify who we are? I'll add further. I spoke at Oxford University at a Roger Scruton lecture, a famous conservative intellectual, passed a few years ago, and it was full of conservative students talking about identity. And then after I spoke, I asked everyone in the room to say, what do you think it means to be English? And not one of them gave the same answer. And it had a complete total range, including someone who said, well, it doesn't really mean anything to be English. Another classic thing you hear is, to be English is just fair play and tolerance. I'm like, well, that's what the Americans have. Like, that doesn't distinguish us from them whatsoever. So back to the complex issue of English identity. Someone like Roger Scruton himself would say it's from place, and you might say, well, you're from England, then if you're born here, then that makes you English. But that's complicated, and I'll explain why. For example, Elon Musk, ethnically partly English, from South Africa, very much an American citizen. Likewise, you could be completely ethnically English, have lived 300 years in America, but you're not English. You're an American. That's partly because there's an ethnicity. You are administratively of somewhere, from a place, and then there's the cultural aspect as well. So there's and to make things all the more complicated, all of these realms, the domains rather, and the ethnicities or the identities themselves are porous. So even if you come up with a conclusion, you will have to say, except in these times it's complicated and more. There are exceptions, I think. There's no clear-cut rule on what we are. Now, what I said to you before we started rolling is I identify as English over British. And it is the British identity that actually unifies the Scots, the Welsh, the English, the Northern Irish, and all of the non of those who are in Britain, from across, whether you're from Jamaica, Nigeria. Kemi Badenoch, leader of the Conservative Party, is Nigerian heritage. She would assume as British. So there's a question. We're in a muddle, I think, particularly with mass migration. Now, the conversation we were having before is, I identify as English. I find it harder to articulate what it is to be British. British is a 300-year-old concept. Well, I guess it's not a 300-year-old concept, but the Act of Union was in 1707 when Scotland and England combined. So, whereas England is 1,100 years old. In fact, we have our 1,100-year anniversary in 2 years' time, I think. And it was founded by, Athelstan, King Athelstan founded it, but I would say we go back to King Alfred the Great, who united the English against the Great Heathen Army. I identify with that heritage. So for me, national identity is, and people off camera, I'm interested, but they're going to disagree with me, but it is to take on the heritage of a people as if it is your own and to actively participate in it. So I think you can go to America, like Elon Musk is, and become an American because he's taking on the heritage from the founding fathers as if it is his own heritage, and then moving forward, and taking on and participating in that heritage. I think that you can come here to this country and you might not be ethnically English, but you hypothetically could participate. A famous example from the scripture would be Moses' wife, who was an Abyssinian woman, but she's very much part of Israel. Israel, a nation without a state as it wandered through the desert to the promised land. She was, I would say, part of the Israel tribe. So again, there's a lot of this problem with identity as you get into semantics. I'm doing a lot of thinking out loud here, and
well, you've given me about 20 ways to go here, but I guess the main one is, so do you think that all of the problems that your country seems to be facing right now are downstream from this? It's downstream from this inability to define itself properly.
Well, it actually gets worse because there's a deliberate attack as well on all things that might be deemed positive about our identity. So this happens in the education system. There's a polling done last week that something like only 10% of young British people in that range would fight and die for their country. And unfortunately, these kids have been taught that we are a bad people. They're not being taught the truth, which is that we are the people that defeated Napoleon. We are the people that ended slavery. We are the people that defeated Hitler and the Nazis. We had some help from across the pond. But that is an infinitely proud history to take on and have, and they're not being taught any of that. In fact, they've been taught the opposite, that we are the perpetrators, irredeemably so, of the slave trade, and that somehow whatever Hitler did, that the idea of nationalism, it's not okay to be, just because the Germans did such a terrible, evil stuff, that we can't be proud about our own history. We learned a lot of different lessons than the Americans did after the Second World War. You, I think, learned that America defeated the Nazis, and so that's something to be proud of. In Europe, the lesson seemed to have been nationalism is bad. And so we had a sort of divergence
That's
there.
very fundamentally different.
Yeah. So basically, there's an attack from all sides. But the point I was making right at the beginning is that, leaving aside the progressive radicals who are trying to deliberately take apart our culture, even those who are proud of our culture are struggling to, I'm sure, all agree on what it is that our culture is, what it is that our identity is.
Yeah, that's much of what this conference is about. Obviously, it's not fully about just the UK, but clearly identity for all of the Western nations is kind of top of mind here. Are you hopeful? I keep asking everybody this, but are you hopeful that, you guys will straighten this out? I mean, there's major problems that, from deportations and closing borders, and then still having to fix all of the internal mess that's here.
My hope has been with seeing Trump's win in the States, because what we saw there is a yanking of the Overton window. I was in New York City during the election, and I saw young people wearing MAGA hats around Soho. And that was unthinkable in 2016. And clearly, a culture can shift and can change. We are in dire straits in England and Britain, but things can be turned around. I think, one of the big issues we're facing, I mentioned immigration. There's a problem of the relations between Muslims and non-Muslims in this country. And, but that's not, part of that problem is that we are, there's the kind of a liberal progressive two-tier approach to justice. So where I'm hopeful is, I look to, let's say, Singapore, I look to the Emirates and the Saudis, who have, Singapore has 20% Muslim population. The Saudis and the Emirates, obviously Muslim majority countries, but they're very outspoken about how to deal with Islamism. In Britain, Islamism is a serious problem. 1 in 100 British Muslims are on a MI5 jihadi watch list. Something like 95 people have been killed by Islamists since 95, I think. 2005. And we've got a lot of issues with those groups mixing. But I think if we take law and order seriously, we get rid of two-tier system, we actually punish perpetrators, and people start respecting the law, then we might actually have social cohesion come again.
And you think that might happen?
Well, we've got to stop. We've got to get migration under control as well. Absolutely. It depends who's in government. For a long time, I was against. I didn't really believe in politicians to solve our problems. I believe that you should do things with social enterprises and even business enterprises, and that's actually how you move things along. But clearly, it's come from the political classes and the Westminster Uniparty that so many of our problems, going back to Tony Blair through the Conservatives. I actually, at this point, think that Boris Johnson is the most despicable of the lot. A lot of this happened under his watch. We actually had a MAGA victory in 2019. And by MAGA victory, what I mean is a coalition against progressive excesses.
And it just didn't do anything.
Well, it was under Boris Johnson's leadership, and he not only squandered it, but he turbocharged all the bloody problems. Net zero, lunacy, all the we had the Boris wave of immigration just going through the roof. So Boris Johnson, there's rumors that he might make or certainly he wants to make a comeback, and Americans might like him, but he's sold out our country. But that's another conversation.
Let me just ask you one other thing, which we've discussed before, but worth mentioning. I mean, because the free speech situation here is, let's say, less than stellar, and people are getting arrested for memes and a whole bunch more, how worried are you in your day-to-day life that you're going to say something on a show like this or put out a tweet or whatever, and then have someone come knock on your door? From an American perspective, it's like completely unthinkable.
I've quite literally had phone calls from my lawyer about tweets saying that technically it's illegal. I'll say this about free speech because it came up in J.D. Vance's speech in Munich at the Munich conference. I have a feeling that the concept that free speech is a British value is an import from America. I'm not totally convinced it is. We had blasphemy laws until 2008. We had the sedition laws until 2009. The reason we're famous for free speech is because we have philosophers like John Locke, John Stuart Mill, John Milton with Areopagitica. We have these great arguments for free speech. But the reason those arguments were had is because free speech didn't exist. If you go back to the Bill of Rights, 1689, the only thing about free speech in there was parliamentary privilege, that you could say what you wanted in Parliament. But we don't even have that. I mean, last year, Nigel Farage's parliamentary privilege was revoked over the Southport killing. He wasn't allowed to say.
And then he was debanked too, wasn't he?
That was either earlier in the year or the year before. That's another problem. But the point I want to make is, the only defense we have for free speech today in Britain is from the European Convention of Human Rights, Article 10. But if you read the article, Part A, you have freedom of speech. Part B, except in these situations. And then it's just a long list of things you can't, including whatever your nation state decides you can't. And then if you look at the laws against free speech, I mean, there are dozens of them. So we definitely don't have free speech now. When J.D. Vance says in his speech that free speech is a shared value, I'm not totally convinced free speech is one that we have here. In fact, I believe that the First Amendment in America was because they saw what it was like not to have free speech in Europe, and they're like, well, we have that here. So now
maybe he meant we'd like to share it.
We'd like to share it with you.
Yeah.
I'd like to have it also, but I'm not sure we've ever really had it.
We will continue to exercise
Thanks,
our
Dave.
free speech, my friend. If you're looking for more eye-opening and worldly conversations, make sure to dive into our international playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a wide variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.
I hate the phrase, the idea that the pendulum's swinging too far. I would rather say, is the pendulum going to swing to the wrong place? Are we going to overreact? And it could be, a step toward fascism. It could be instead, it could be just too much exuberance. We take Doge cuts 10 too many things or whatever, There's a test coming now that whatever this new right is, that hasn't decided who it is, its identity's not set yet. There are vying factions trying to determine who this new coalition is represented by, what philosophies, whether it's Burkean, whether it's, fascist, Evolin. There are people talking about whether it's Schmittian, whether it's Glockian.
I think it's just Trumpian and
or if it's just Trump,
American.
Or just, make America great again. Whatever it is, there's this ambiguity in what it is. And the question is, will it survive the most brutal of all tests, which is, you now have power. Let's see what a steward you are of it. And I remain, unfortunately, nervous about how we might do with that test.
James Lindsay, this has to be at least your dozenth appearance on the Rubin Report, would you say?
I think that's all right. I hope so.
Ballpark dozen. You're definitely in the top 10 of repeat guests.
I'll take it.
So let's just try not to muck it up if we could.
Oh, no.
We are here at the ARC conference, and much like when I spoke to you here about a year and a half ago, what I find most interesting about this conference is there seems to be a real move to find all of the commonalities between, say, the classical liberals, where guys like you and I fall, and the more traditional conservatives.
Yeah.
It seems to be working, at least for now. Certainly in America, it's working. Do you think it can hold? What do you think the weaknesses are? And do you see a difference between it holding in, say, America versus maybe here in UK or more broadly Europe?
I do think it can hold, actually. I'll say that, given that even just standing outside the room a few minutes ago, I was getting a text message from somebody here at the conference who was saying, I don't think it can hold. So there is some nervousness about this. This is a question.
And the reason I'm starting that with you is because there are plenty of people literally in this building right now who you've had major arguments with and spats with on that other side of it.
Yeah.
But there's some healing happening, I think, too.
A little bit. So here's what I think, though, is the reason that I think that this coalition can be somewhat stable. If we think back to, the 90s, let's say, just kind of as an archetype, we have the classical liberals and the progressives have somehow aligned themselves against the conservatives. And they say, no, we're basically the same. We're open-minded together, or whatever it is. And the conservatives are obviously not, and they're a problem. So these two are in cahoots. And slowly, and then all at once, the classical liberals discovered these guys are lunatics. The progressives are not sharing our values. They're not actually even open-minded. And so now the classical liberals have fled from the left, and they found a home with these traditional conservatives. And this other alignment is actually a bit, it's fragile as well, but I think it's a bit different. And the reason is because there is an underlying respect for reality that exists on the classical liberal and the conservative side that does not exist with the progressives. And I mean this in a deep way. To talk kind of in a very, deep sense, the progressive view, their epistemology, so to speak, the way they think about the world, is they have an idealistic future to which they are shooting. And their knowledge, their theory of knowledge, their theory of morals is all utilitarian around achieving that future.
In essence, right.
To that ideal, right? Almost this Platonic ideal. Whereas the epistemological force of the classical liberals is, well, let's check the evidence. Let's bounce it off the real world and humble ourselves. And the epistemological force of the traditional conservative, the Burkean conservative, is tradition. What has worked in the past, which is this kind of, from my perspective at least, which is this kind of heuristic to reality, as opposed to like, let's do the test, let's check it out directly. There's still this adherence to this has worked in the past. So there must be, even if we don't know what it is, there must be something in the sauce that works. And that's an adherence to reality. They're not, neither side is shooting for an ideal, right? No, it is possible to get idealistic. And when conservatism goes idealistic, you end up with fascism. And that's a threat. But it's not intrinsic to the traditional conservative, nor is it appealing to the classical liberal. So this coalition is qualitatively different than the one that was, we're both open-minded.
Yeah. Well, I'm thrilled to hear you say that, because I agree. I think it's clearly represented by what's happening with kind of the tech bros and Trump at the moment. But in some sense, Trump is the ultimate version of all of this, isn't he? Because he's ushered in conservatism while obviously not being a conservative, right?
Yeah.
In Trump's real head, I think if you took the 1985 version of Trump, he's just a New York liberal.
Yeah.
But he needed conservatism to sort of build a world that he could live in. And that's the world that we're all in now.
Yeah. Trump is just fundamentally American. His instincts, I don't think he's doctrinaire. I'm not to say he's unsophisticated philosophically, but I don't think he cares that much about these deep philosophical questions about, what do the Burkeans think about this?
Right. You don't think he cares about that much?
Not too much. I'm just guessing. He might secretly be reading, in the morning. You never know. But I think it's more, what's on Fox and Friends. Yeah. And so he's just kind of this quintessential American, and what's his gut instinct is, well, what he says, make America great again. And how do we do that? And what he's realized is that progressive vision, whether he was a 1985 liberal Democrat or not, that progressive vision is not going to work. The ideal that they're shooting for is a catastrophe. And so he's brought this, a resurgent awakening to, whatever made America work, we've got to rediscover it, which is that appeal to the traditionalism. And he's forged this new kind of, like you said, this weird pro-America classical liberal thing with conservative values are somehow necessary to make this thing function.
So I always ask you every time you're on how you feel about being more in common cause with religious people, because you still are an atheist, right? So you're still an atheist, but yet you go to Christian events all the time. Now you speak at Turning Point events. Yeah. I think the world that you want to live in is actually very, very similar to the world that, say, a Christian conservative wants to live in.
Yeah.
Have your feelings on any of that changed over the years? Is it?
Certainly. While I haven't accepted the profound metaphysical claim at the center of the Christian faith, the moral precepts, the teaching, the just kind of logical civilizational structure that the both Judeo and Christian, in fact, the Christians can get a little worked up about this, but my opinion is that Jesus brought the Jewish model to the Gentiles, right? And so the Judeo-Christian model ethics, the way they think through problems, the way that they deal with one another, how they order and structure society, I think are actually very, very profoundly good. The Bible, in my opinion, is a record of, several thousand years of when you do this, civilization works, and when you deviate from this, everything goes sideways, and you deserved it. And just this, the poor Israelites, go through this cycle dozens of times through the books of the Bible. And then we get to the New Testament, and you have Paul running around, you fools, you're doing it too. And so I think that this is a very key message, that when you follow certain precepts for your individual life, for your family life, and this is going to sound very traditionally conservative, for your individual life, then to your family life, and then to your community life, and then to your state or nation life, and then, as Jordan's been saying here at ARC, all the way to your duties to the ultimate, things work better. And so I've become quite sympathetic to these arguments. I find it to be an intentional source when I don't know how should I think about this. I will find myself turning to go ask the Bible rather than to just sit and chew on it myself or pick up Nietzsche or some lunatic.
So in some sense, is there a utilitarian version of that, or that's sort of what you're laying out there, in that I know you well enough to know that this is working within the way you live and your lens through life, but maybe from the purely atheistic perspective, it doesn't really scale properly, where religion gives it the scale.
Yeah, that's probably right. The fact is that I think that, like I said, the way that I see the Bible is that this is this is the long record of the trials and tribulations of a society that figured it out, figure out how to make something actually work, to make productivity, to make positive sum games come out of human interaction. And if that's divinely inspired, or if it's the very astute observations of a very challenged and over history and detailed people, thoughtful people, I don't know which one it is, but I think it's something that A, we should take seriously, and B, we should take seriously because of its now long proven track record. And now that we've kind of run this weird experiment of, I guess, post 1950s God is dead, and it kind of opened doors to things going off the rails, maybe we should take it a little bit more seriously than we have been. So yeah, I don't know how it scales without the faith part, but the pragmatic side, the just brash American side, like Trump, I don't know if he's Christian. I'm not positive that he is, but he seems to,
right. He seems to have gone to something much deeper than the political part of all of this.
Yes.
Yeah, which actually, even for the first time in this last few months, or maybe post-assassination attempt, to hear him making a reference or two to God that actually does feel more authentic than sort of his favorite Bible verse or something.
Yeah,
that he's living
he's
for
not
a purpose
2 Corinthians anymore,
right?
But he's literally been to be, I guess, metaphorical with a literal, he's been touched by the angel of death. One does not merely have a bullet pass through one's flesh without doing some serious reflection on how fortunate we are to get to have this experiment of life. I know that I watched that, and I've said this on stage with Charlie Kirk at Turning Point events, that it was okay, atheist, or Charlie makes me call myself an agnostic. It's more honestly correct, I suppose.
Yeah.
I have to grapple with the fact that I'm pretty sure I witnessed a miracle on television. You were on my phone, really, before the plane took off, but I witnessed a miracle. And then, Jordan was talking out of the book of Numbers the other day. I've taken the book of Numbers very seriously. This is wandering in the desert, and they're very dissatisfied. They want to go back to Egypt, where they had their cucumbers and their slavery, and at least it was comfortable. And God says, no, you're not going to the promised land. Canaan's not for you. And it's because, why? What does God say? He said, well, I've given you 10, which is maybe a literal and maybe a symbolic number for many. I've given you 10 proofs, miracles, the manna from heaven, the Red Sea, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't have faith now, you never will. So you don't deserve it, right? And so I'm sitting there thinking, God in the book of Numbers, as the story goes, is saying, I've given you miracles, so you better believe. And then I watched Trump not get shot, right, as it actually happened. And I'm thinking, did we just have, did God turn his head at that last second and then say, all right, America, here's your moment. Do you have what it takes, which is faith, to enter the promised land or not? I have to chew on this.
Right. So regardless of whether you view it purely through a religious lens or through a more secular lens or whatever you want to call it. In some sense, it doesn't matter because the fruits of that are really the same.
I think that, yeah, regardless, there's this call to a faith in the fact, for like Charlie Kirk very frequently says, or he said at least at America Fest several times on the stage, we've been given another chance as a nation that we didn't deserve. And I think that we really should literally or metaphorically fall on our knees and be grateful for that and not waste the opportunity. And of course, that's not to be weird because we're at ARC and just circle it back, but that's actually what Jordan has said ARC is all about. There's this opportunity that we now have in the world to kind of define the story of our own future and to think through what that story should look like and how do we make that story grounded in reality and also touching tradition, but maybe even not completely lost on idealism. And these are the things that we now have to grapple with as the phrase that they keep using, and I'm not entirely comfortable with, is in our civilizational moment.
Which is interesting because when we did this arc, it was a little over a year ago. It was right after October 7th. There was a real feeling of, oh my God, is Western civilization completely collapsing right now? Is this the beginning? And now we're doing this just a month after Trump gets sworn in. And there's an incredible feeling of hope, which also shows you that things change very fast. Last thing, which I think I know the answer to already, but I will ask you nonetheless. Are you white-pilled for America at the moment? It seems like everyone in this room or everyone in this building feels very positive about America right now, from what I can tell.
Yeah, have you seen those pills with the little? I think they used to have like diet pills and the little colored balls.
I knew you were going to give me something more nuanced than just a white pill.
No, it's not.
This is like a time release.
Yeah, there's multiple colors. Some of them are black.
Some of them are clown pills.
Some of them are I'm very nervous. I said this. You were there at the PragerU inauguration, Make Education Great Again event, and I said that I believe that we have at least one more major test. America has one more major test ahead of it. So while I am optimistic in general, I am nervous about what amounts to the backlash.
Yeah.
I hate the phrase, the idea that the pendulum's swinging too far. I would rather say, is the pendulum going to swing to the wrong place? Are we going to overreact? And it could be, a step toward fascism. It could be instead, it could be just too much exuberance. We take Doge cuts 10 too many things or whatever, There's a test coming now that whatever this new right is that hasn't decided who it is, its identity's not set yet. There are vying factions trying to determine who this new coalition is represented by, what philosophies, whether it's Burkean, whether it's fascist Evolin. There are people talking about whether it's Schmittian, whether it's Glockian.
I think it's just Trumpian and
or if it's just Trump,
American.
Or just make America great again. Whatever it is, there's this ambiguity in what it is, and the question is, will it survive the most brutal of all tests, which is you now have power. Let's see what a steward you are of it. And I remain, unfortunately, nervous about how we might do with that test. But I'm actually growing a little bit more optimistic, especially not to be, again, cute, but the conversations I've had here, even with people I profoundly disagree with, have been encouraging, I think, in that direction.
I guess we will have to continue this in the future to find out.
I hope so.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop screaming, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell. All right, everybody, this is the Rubin Report. I'm Dave Rubin. It's March 27th, 2025. We are live streaming on Rumble, on YouTube, on Locals. I know you've tapped that notification bell, so I don't even need to finish this. Yeah, you got it. We got a Rubin Report Locals community Q&A. We did not have a post-game show yesterday because I was on Piers Morgan immediately after the show, and we can't have a post-game show today because I got to get over to New York because I'm on the #1 show in late night, Greg Gutfeld, or Gutfeld with an exclamation point. tonight and tomorrow's show, because I'm on Jesse Waters and I think Fox and Friends and a whole bunch of other media stuff in New York. Tomorrow's 11 a.m. show should be the highlights of Gutfeld. Thank you for bearing with us. I promise you some good laughs. I can already guarantee it in advance. I'm going to poke and noodle that little Greg Gutfeld guy. So we got a couple stories of the week that are just, we're not doing hardcore politics today. It's going to be a little bit of stuff from overseas. And then is there going to be a Islamic mega city in Texas? We'll find out. That's what we're doing on the Rubin Report today. All right, so we showed you the video last week of Conor McGregor, current MMA legend, former MMA fighter, at the White House, really making the case for Ireland being for the Irish. I know that that's very controversial, you know, a pot of gold, a leprechaun, a rainbow, a Guinness, that sort of thing. Not necessarily a place that should just be overrun with immigrants from the Middle East and from Africa. It's really not controversial to say that. There's nothing wrong with fair-skinned white people. How you doing, Connor? Good to see you, as always. Check this out from Inevitable West. Breaking: Ireland's Director of Public Prosecutions is now considering charging Conor McGregor with incitement for hatred for posts he made on X back in 2023. He could face up to 2 years in prison. This is Trump-style legal warfare and blatant election interference. So we've been through all of this, guys. We've been through this many, many times here in the United States with Donald Trump. And now it appears that it's happening to Conor McGregor in Ireland. These are posts that he put up years ago. Clearly, nobody was looking into these posts until he shows up at the White House. Kind of implies he's going to announce a run for president, then announces it, I think the next day, maybe 2 days later. Conor McGregor tweeted this. I'll even try to do it in an Irish accent. "Fact! For the people of Ireland, I stand my ground. May our truth never be silenced. The fact is, if there is 7 years of zero resistance inside Áras un Toran towards government, Ireland is done for. Magnify where we are right now times 7,000. I would prefer to sail my yachts than have to approach the soulless, colourless combines of Dale Ireland every day. But if I do not, I am well aware of Ireland's faith, and I will never let that happen. Vote McGregor. The future of our country depends on it. Where's me freaking shillelagh?" It was a little Scottish. Kind of worked. Yeah. So people are all focused on this now, and they're going, well, what the hell is happening in Ireland? Like, it's interesting. If you think of all the different countries in the world, okay, Spain is for Spanish people, Britain's for British people. And we know that these things have largely changed. And how do you define what your country is and what your culture is and all of that? There's something about Ireland. You think of the rolling greens and the golf courses and the beer and the leprechauns. Like, it seems pretty straightforward. There's a country for Irish people. Not to say black people can't live there or religious minorities or anything else. But like, it seems like a kind of straightforward one. Like, if you're kind of pale, you got reddish hair, you're good to go. However, it's changing. Here's some video of Ireland's St. Patrick's Day festival just last week. All right, so look, it's nice to see some people wearing green, but you've got all kinds of different flags. You've got all kinds of different garb. Remember, Ireland is not a melting pot the way America is. I like the Irish healthcare workers for Palestine. How do they feel about the Irish traditions and culture? You have to wonder. So that, in essence, is a visual example of what Conor McGregor is fighting against. And no, it does not mean that he is racist or anything like that. Tracy O'Mahony, who's an ex-political commentator, wrote this. In June 2024, the Irish government voted to opt Ireland into the EU Migration and Asylum Pact against the wishes of the Irish people. Ireland has until June of 26 to pass the necessary laws needed to enact the pact. Since June of 2024, there has been silence from the government regarding the pact. Less than 1 week ago, Conor McGregor stood on the world stage and declared that Ireland has a mass, unvetted, uncontrolled immigration problem, and that should he run and be elected president of Ireland, he would do all in his power to challenge the pact. Today, the Minister for Justice, Jim O'Callaghan, has secured government approval to submit Ireland's national implementation plan for the EU Asylum and Migration Pact to the European Commissioner, with Minister of State for Migration, Colm Brophy, stating that we are not waiting for June 26 2026 to make changes to our systems. Be under no doubt that the government are running scared, because if Conor McGregor secures a nomination needed to run for the presidency, and if he can run on an immigration platform, he stands a good chance of being elected the next president of Ireland. So what is the answer? The government will do everything in their power to remove debate around the EU Migration Pact by endeavoring to pass all of the necessary laws before November 2025. This government is rotten to the core. So you see what's happening here. It's the same thing that we're seeing in so many of these countries, whether it's Britain or France or partially what we even had to do here in America, certainly what's going on in Canada. The native people of a country who wish to have Western values and who wish to maintain their culture and everything else don't want to just be overrun with people and have to live under the whims and wishes of unelected bureaucrats that live somewhere in Brussels. It's not much more complicated than that, and it doesn't make anyone racist, and it's just fine if an Irishman wants to go to the pub with his shillelagh, have a Guinness, and, smack around his wife after. Or maybe not that part, but you know what I'm saying. Conor McGregor tweeted this, against the wishes of the Irish people, modus operandi of a government that has long since abandoned the voices of its people, the people of Ireland. Everything said in the White House true, and we fight, fight, fight. Hey guys, let's get real for a sec. Anyone else feel like they're drowning under credit card bills, personal loans, or maybe even some leftover medical debt? It's like no matter how hard you work, your money's just slipping away to lenders instead of staying with you. I've been there and it's exhausting. But here's the good news. It doesn't have to stay this way, and that's where PDS Debt comes in. PDS Debt isn't just about managing your debt, it's about taking charge of it. Their platform digs into your specific financial situation, not some one-size-fits-all nonsense, and builds a plan that's tailored just for you. But they're not here to slap a Band-Aid on it. They're about finding a path to financial freedom that actually works with your life. And get this, no minimum credit score required. Whether your credit's taken a beating or it's just okay, PDS Debt is ready to help you save more, knock out that debt faster, and finally start building up your savings again. Here's what you need to do. Get started at pdsdebt.com/Rubin to complete your free debt assessment to see what options are available to you. Every day you wait, it's costing you money. Get started with your free debt analysis in just 30 seconds at pdsdebt.com/Rubin. That's pdsdebt.com/Rubin. Take back control by visiting pdsdebt.com/Rubin. You've got this. Let's make it happen. And we thought this was interesting. Here's just a guy that was going around. He appears to be a local Irish journalist, going around talking to people about Conor McGregor and the immigration problems and much more. And this is just a regular lady. And yeah.
Would you support Conor McGregor if he were to become the president of Ireland?
Yes, I would definitely support Conor McGregor. What Conor McGregor said in the White House last week was extremely accurate and very, very true of how the people of Ireland, North and South, feel about illegal mass migration. Now, I fully understand that we've all made mistakes, and some people might say Conor's made mistakes in the past. Well, guess what? So have I. I've made a lot of them. It doesn't mean that what I say today is not true. And he was speaking facts.
Do you think Conor McGregor is the last chance for Ireland before they go too far in the wrong direction?
I'll tell you this. I'm frightened for the direction that we're going in, and we need a real big change, and I think it has to be something like the Donald Trump in America, and Conor McGregor, from what I can see, is maybe our best hope.
First off, that woman's great. She wants to run for politics here in America. Come on over, lady. Get on board. Yes, we've all made mistakes. Nobody's perfect. It does not mean the truth that Conor McGregor or she is laying out today is wrong. What was his name? Nick Shirley? Nick Shirley is the name of the guy, by the way, who was doing that interview there. And again, none of this has anything to do with racism. What they're realizing is they're losing their country. And now I want to connect this to something that's happening here in America. This story is really, really wild. So in Plano, Texas, which is just outside of Dallas, and Texas, obviously a huge, huge state. There's an awful lot of land. They're doing an awful lot of building there. And it's one of, the big three states, I would say, Texas, Florida, and Tennessee, that all of the blue state people are fleeing to. Well, there have been plans put into place for a giant Islamic mega city. But don't take my word for it. Take this guy's word for it.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, I'm sure many of you have heard of the amazing project that we're doing known as Epic Cities. We are, alhamdulillah, constructing an entire city half an hour from downtown Dallas, literally 30 minutes from our own Plano Masjid over here. It's going to be a city of over 1,000 people. Alhamdulillah, we launched this website last year and we sold the entire phase 1 within days. Because of the demand, we are now opening up Epic Ranches. Epic Ranches is an exclusive opportunity for those who want to be within minutes of Epic City, but also want larger plots. We have 2 Epic Ranches. Epic Ranches 1 begins with 1 acreage and goes up to 5 acreage. And Epic Ranches 2 has plots of half acre and also investment opportunities for those who want to build condominiums. Brothers and sisters, this is a limited time opportunity. It is an amazing time to invest for the future, not only in yourselves, but of your children after you. We are inshallah ta'ala going to change the entire da'wah scene by demonstrating to the world what it means to be a Muslim living in the West.
Okay, there's a bunch of things to talk about here. First off, if you're an American, any American has any right to live anywhere. There's no such cities. That's a Christian city. There might be a city where mostly Christians live. There might be a city where mostly Muslims live, Dearborn, Michigan. There might be a city where mostly Jewish people live, Little Enclave in Brooklyn. All these things are possible. But you can't stop other people from living there. Now, I don't know that this group of people have stopped anybody, but do you think you'd be welcome there if you were a Jewish family? Do you think a Christian family would be welcome there? Do you think you'd be able to open up any other type of place of worship besides a mosque? You think 3 Christian families could come in and open up a church? Do you think the Jainists are going to be welcome over there? How's it going to go for, I don't know, gays or lesbians or the bis or whatever else? So this does represent I would say, a real divergence from what America is all about. And interestingly, Texas, almost 10 years ago, did pass a law banning Sharia law, which is obviously Islamic religious law, which dictates really over, it's a religious system and a political system over the people's lives who choose to be part of it. Lara Logan, who's an actual investigative journalist, she wrote this, breaking, Attorney General Ken Paxton announces investigation into Islamic mega city development in Plano, Texas. Epic, and that's what it is right there. Look, it is worth thinking about this stuff, guys, and it doesn't make you bigoted to say, okay, this group of people over here shouldn't have a city in the United States that is just for them, that won't be accommodating to other people. You want to have whatever your religious beliefs are, and you want to have your places of worship and your way of life and all of your things, that's fine. But we don't want to take the beautiful melting pot of America and turn it into the sort of segregated version of Europe. We do not want to do that. So we'll see what happens in Texas. I don't think they're going to put up for it, and we will see for sure. Guys, let's talk about G2 for a second, and we'll have a RubinReport.locals.com community Q&A in just a sec. You guys know I'm all about logic and reason. Well, here's some logic. If your feet are killing you at the end of the day, you need better shoes. That's why I love G2 shoes by Gravity Defier. Unlike trendy sneakers, these are built on real shock-absorbing technology. Their patented VersoShock system absorbs impact, returns energy, and helps align your body so whether you're walking, running, or standing all day, it feels effortless. Right now, my listeners get 30% off orders over $120. Just text Rubin30 to 91888 or visit gdefy.com and use code Rubin30 at checkout. Use logic, choose comfort, G2. All right, community Q&A, here we go. Olaf says, dogs are pack animals. Would you ever get a buddy for Clyde? They really do entertain each other. I think we have some pictures of Clyde from this morning. There's Clyde right there. He's hanging out on the couch. He's taken over that one cushion because the kids have taken over pretty much everything else, and they've got their little dome there in the corner. I kind of like hanging out on the dome. It's pretty cool. Would we ever get another dog? No, not at this juncture. There's a lot of running around and food all over the place and messes and everything else. Clyde, he's a great dog. Many of you know the story. Got him right before lockdowns, or just as lockdowns were starting. Our dog before, Emma, had just passed away, 16 years old. We had just put her down. We didn't want to get another dog, but I heard they were going to kill all these dogs at shelters. I ran into a shelter. I didn't even have a mask. Saved him. He's with us. He's great. He's a good guard dog, but it's just a bit much. It's a bit much. I would love maybe in another time, or if we move to a farm one day, having more animals in general and maybe some more dogs. I don't know. We'll see. But right now, we're focusing on small humans. That's where we're at the moment. Elizabeth says, do you think leftists will understand that siding with jihadists is dangerous before they're thrown from a roof or as they're being thrown from a roof? Well, generally, as you're being thrown from a roof, you do start rethinking things. I mean, look, look, Queers for Palestine. And as I wrote in Don't Burn This Book, Queers for Palestine is very different than Palestine for Queers. How do these queers, whatever that means, I don't know, are they gay or they're just, they got a little of everything or they got nothing or whatever it is, but how do they think they would be treated by Hamas? So we picture the Hamas guys with the masks and the thing and the knife and the gun and the whole thing. Like, do you think that they would like you? So the problem with burying your head in the sand is that you just get buried a little bit low. You just get beheaded a little bit lower on the neck. It does not work. And this sort of what they call the red-green alliance, the alliance between the Islamists and the communists, and that's in essence what the queers are. It is not going to end well for you guys. Like you can bow to them forever, and either you will live on your knees or you will be beheaded. It's as simple as that. Rich on the Farm, I believe it was your birthday yesterday, Rich. Happy birthday. Says, have you noticed how disingenuous people often start with, so you think, as a way to mischaracterize your opinion and then criticize what they hallucinate? So when I was reading this question before, I like to take a quick glance. Before that immediately reminded me of one of Jordan Peterson's greatest hits. This is when Jordan and I were on tour. This is back in early 2018. He went on Kathy Newman's show in Britain, and this illustrates perfectly what you're laying out right there.
So you say, I mean, that sounds pretty bad. You're saying
It's
there's a
bad.
crime, but you're just saying that's the way it is.
And
So
that you
you're
can
saying
rely on.
women, is that what you're saying? But you're saying basically, well, that's just a fact of
No,
life.
it's saying it
Women aren't
doesn't
necessarily
matter because I'm very, very, very careful with my words.
But you're saying it's not. You say women, so you're saying women are just more sensible. So you're saying that. So you're saying give people equality of opportunity, that's fine. But still women aren't going to make it. That's what you're really
It
saying.
depends on your measurement technique.
To succeed is what you're saying.
Motion.
You're saying that women aren't intelligent enough to run these top companies?
No, I didn't say that at all.
You said that.
First off, Jordan has really had to glow up over the years too, huh? But that thing where Jordan, do you know anyone in the history of the world that speaks more clearly than Jordan? Does he do a lot of high-level ideas and sometimes you have to think about what he's saying for a sec? Yeah, but does he choose his words carefully and make a declarative statement every time something comes out of his mouth? The answer is obviously yes. So that's a perfect example of what you're talking about. There's this condescending way of, here, I said something, oh, so what you're saying is, and then it's never exactly what the person was saying. Leftists do this constantly. They have a lot of linguistic tricks. I think it's also why so many of them, when I play these clips of The View or some of these other shows with these women, they talk like Valley girls. There's something about that. Or even something about, why are all the men on CNN asexual? There's something about that a way of thinking that leads to weird mnemonic tricks and speech patterns and all of these things. I would prefer somebody who just speaks from the heart, tells you what they think. You go from there and see what happens, whether you agree with them or not. Shecky Green says, in my view, I smell a rat. How on earth does the most prolific Donald J. Trump hater anywhere get in this restricted chat room? So, of course, you're talking about this Signal story, and there's a lot to think about here. I really, really tried to cover it as cleanly and honestly as possible, fully admitting and accepting that if this was a Biden administration thing, I'd probably be going a little bit harder on it because Biden wasn't competent. Nobody around him was competent. The entire Biden administration actually was a scandal. And as the years go by, it will become more and more obvious. But as it pertains to this, there's this group chat. You've got JD, you've got Tulsi, you've got Marco, Pete Hegseth, you've got some of the primo all-stars of the administration in there. They're debating and discussing what their plans are as far as military strikes with the Houthis while we're doing it. So it wasn't some sort of secret that we were doing anything against the Houthis to get these trading ports open in the Red Sea. And then there's now some debate because Jeffrey Goldberg, who is in essence a leftist, he's an Atlantic never Trumper guy, somehow got in the chat. It sounds like Mike Waltz, NSA Mike Waltz, put him in the chat, or whoever set up the chat through Mike Waltz, wasn't one of his guys did it. So was there an absolute moronic kind of boomer level screw up of who got in the chat? Yeah. Have we all accidentally texted the wrong person because you think you're texting one friend whose name is Frank and it turns out you texted the other Frank? Everyone's done it. Have you accidentally put someone in whatever? That doesn't excuse any of it, but that's just like a flat out obvious mistake. Now, I think you're arguing that perhaps there's something a little more nefarious there. Like, how did, like, maybe someone else put him in Signal? Perhaps. I don't think anything's off the table, actually. The real question here is, if you read what was going on in the thread, which we showed you much of this week, it's like there's honest debate happening there. And JD's talking about how do we frame this properly for the American people who may not have an appetite for it and everything else. That's also the backdrop of the fact that the strikes all worked, right? The strikes, no Americans got hurt or anything else. And we sent a warning to the Houthis, you got to stop doing this. Okay, fine. The real question now is, what do you do about Mike Waltz, who apparently is the guy that let him in, or someone that he sets up his phone or whatever. And then I saw all sorts of people, and I got into a big debate on this on Piers Morgan, claiming that you're not allowed to use Signal for classified information. That is actually still a little unclear to me. We showed you the video yesterday of incoming CIA Director Ratcliffe saying that he was given a computer with Signal on it and told by the CIA people that he's allowed to communicate on there. So there's a lot of stuff here. So I don't think using Signal is illegal for these people. The question is, how long does the kind of scandal last? In some sense, and I'm just giving you the pure politic version of this. I'm not giving you like the pure legal version. In some sense, I think Trump just has to plow through this thing. Waltz did something stupid. Trump has to decide if he wants to fire him or not. That seems fairly obvious, again, unless something really weird happened. But beyond that, I think you just keep moving forward. Nothing in that chat was anything different than what these people are saying publicly. It showed thoughtful policy and debate, and that's all good. Crafty Barb says, how do we get out of this mess? I'm not sure which mess you're talking about, Crafty Barb, but it seems like we're in less messes than we were, say, 6 months ago, right? Like, there's some stuff. The Signal thing is something. Ireland's got some stuff going on. There's some problems all over the world. But like right now, how do you get yourself out of this mess? How about stand up straight with your shoulders back, tell people what you think, fight for what you believe in, live in a place with like-minded people so you can build great things together, build a family, do that kind of stuff. I think that is pretty solid generally, even without knowing what specific mess you're talking about. Susan says, less educated people can be controlled and paid less. So is that why you allowed 12 to 20 million illegally into our country? I think what you're referencing there, Susan, is we played a clip of Sonny Hostin. God bless that racist loon, Sonny Hostin, on the Don Lemon podcast. And she was basically saying, we need public education because if we don't have public education, then everyone's going to be stupid. Of course, never referencing the fact that test scores are going down. Kids can't read at 5th grade levels until they're in 8th grade in certain places. Like there's so many, like and they're being taught all the wrong things and everything else. But of course, you're completely right. Everything they say can just be peeled back so easily. And it's just pure nonsense. Like, okay, so you're right. And right. So you're connecting it to the immigration thing. So it's like, all right, let all these people in and they'll work our jobs. Then they'll be replaced by robots. Then they'll go to state schools and they'll get government handouts. And what will we have at the end? While at the same time, you told them that they moved to a systemically racist place, Sonny. It's strange, Sonny, because you aren't going anywhere because you're making an awful lot of money telling people how terrible it is here. Let's talk about crowd health, and then we got more questions on the other side. Hey guys, let's talk about something that drives me up the wall, health insurance. I mean, is there anything more frustrating? That's exactly why I'm excited to tell you about Crowd Health. This isn't your typical health insurance. It's a smarter, better way to handle healthcare through crowdfunding. Instead of funneling your hard-earned cash to big insurance companies that seem to make a profit by not paying your bills, Crowd Health flips the script. They're shaking things up by cutting out the middleman and making healthcare straightforward and affordable. So how does it work? With Crowd Health, you're joining a health insurance alternative that's all about real support. For just $175 a month for an individual or $575 for a family of 4 or more, you get access to a community ready to step up when you need it most. We're talking about telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, and tons of other perks. No doctor networks holding you back. The best part, you're part of the crowd, a group of folks like you and me who pitch in to cover each other's unexpected medical costs. It's simple, it's human, and it's a game changer. Here's the deal. Let Crowd Health help you with your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $99 per month for your first 3 months by using code DAVE at joincrowdhealth.com. Oh, and a quick note, Crowd Health is not insurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com. Code DAVE. Trust me, your wallet and your sanity will thank you. Tarp says, what's brown and sticky? Who selected the questions today? Joseph. What is brown and sticky? Jello. A Jello pudding pop. It's delicious and it's brown and it's sticky. Theo, do you want one? NY 53813. Laken Riley was white. Does Tiffany Cross care? Oh, well, what you're referencing is that CNN clip that we showed you with Scott Jennings getting into it with this girl, Tiffany Cross. And of course, what she's basically arguing is that Trump is racist because, we're deporting people and some of these people happen to be brown. And she said something like, oh, and if they were taking white babies away from their mothers, we'd be up in arms. And it's like, they're not taking brown babies away. There were no brown babies put on those planes that went to El Salvador. But then he brought up the point, Scott Jennings brought up the point, well, how about we care about Laken Riley, et cetera? Laken Riley, young girl, happened to be white, murdered by an illegal immigrant. Well, let's put it this way. If she was black, more people would know her name. I think we know that much. We did live through BLM, did we not? But that's the sad thing. Like, if you don't really have, if your principles are all connected to whatever the political hot button thing is of the day, you're going to take any position and over time seem crazy. That basically sums up the modern progressive. If you have principles, like actual principles, then you can hold them regardless of the political trends. And it's one of the reasons that Scott Jennings is just doing a bang-up job over on CNN. I honestly think they might be like it's like they're all being punked right now. They're like, what idiot? Can we get another idiot to sit with this guy? Because those are the clips that go viral, even if it makes our network look bad. Marcus says, doesn't Jasmine Crockett's gaslighting remind you of that other relay runner who hit the one in the head with the baton and then claimed it was an accident? Do we have video of this? This is incredible. I don't know how we didn't show this on the show earlier in the week. Look at this. Look at this. That's not how that's not how you do the relay. Everyone knows the relay. You're running, and then the person in front of you is running, and they back here, and then you don't hit them over the baton. That's like a perfect visual example of what Jasmine Crockett is. But that's what all the Democrats are at this point. That's actually a great example of just like, that's her in AOC, right? AOC was running in front of her. She couldn't take it. She has now banged AOC in the head with the crazy baton. AOC is off going that way. She's hanging out with Bernie for a little bit. But watch out. AOC could have a comeback. She can get a bigger baton and smack Crockett. And that will be that. All right, one more for you, and then I got to get on a plane to New York. Izzy says, what is the best dessert and why is it ice cream? Well, Izzy, you are absolutely right. It is ice cream. I don't do much dessert these days, although it was Connor's birthday. We went out. You know what we did? You people will appreciate this. So Connor loves Chili's. Everyone knows it. Millions of people across the world know that Connor loves Chili's. We told him all day long that we were going to Chili's, and he was so excited. He dressed up in his Chili's outfit. It was the whole thing, and we were talking about the salad bar and the wings and the baby back ribs and the sauce all over your face. And then Phoenix said to me, Dave, the Rubin Report's a professional operation. Can we do a little bit better than Chili's? And we took him to my favorite Mexican joint in Miami. It's called Coco in Coconut Grove. And we got did we have any pictures of that? Do we have some pictures of those steaks? Yeah, throw up a picture. We got 2 Wagyu tomahawks that were just, and we had some tequila, and it was a good night. But connect that to dessert. He did blow out a candle on a churro. However, ice cream, yes. I don't eat much dessert. Ice cream, you give me a little mint chocolate cookie, I'm a happy guy. Maybe once a month. That's it. Trying to keep it clean around here. All right, guys. Gutfeld, the #1 show in late night tonight. And then I believe I'm on Fox and Friends tomorrow morning. Not sure what time that'll be. They kind of adjust you as the day goes by. And Jesse Waters tomorrow evening, couple podcasts during the day, and we'll be sure to get a bunch of stuff up. Thank you. Adios.
The other bodies that it affects is the media. So, media takes money from big pharma, from big tech, from government. And it is a huge machine really that is arrayed against the individual, and it makes it incredibly hard to fight. We are trying to fight it, and it's all impossible almost to know where to start. But ultimately you have to start somewhere, and you have to hope that what is happening in the US will have an impact. I mean, we're in a very interesting position now because it's almost like at least some elements of press in the UK, they don't know what to do, because they can no longer maintain the lie. Like, the truth has got out and the public are not stupid. The public know the truth. And the more the media refuse to even acknowledge that there is another narrative, and actually that narrative is blessed with truth and authenticity in the way that the COVID narrative was not. What do you do about that?
All right, so this is a conference obviously about human flourishing and freedom and individual rights and all that. You have been talking about COVID and how it affected this country for quite some time. We sort of left COVID behind. We don't talk about it anymore. There was never a mea culpa. There was never a real postmortem on what happened. So where are you at with COVID and what we should be looking back at and maybe reevaluating?
I mean, I think that's such an important point, because the fact we don't talk about it, I just find staggering. So, I believe, so I'm Jewish by heritage. And honestly, I think what happened during COVID went beyond any reasonable way a democracy should function. I mean, I query whether the UK, the US for that period could even call themselves democracies when you see what happened in terms of, the denial of rights, the censorship, the coercion. So to think that we've moved on from that, that was done, that was yesterday, and here we are again in, these healthy, functioning democracies, I just think is a complete fallacy. So we set up, so I'm the founder of a group called Us for Them. We set up right at the beginning of the pandemic to try and force schools to open in the UK. And what had been a single issue campaign around school openings very quickly became a campaign for human flourishing, for freedom, for a way of life, for kids, but then, to be honest, just as much for adults. And we won't stop talking about what happened, because I firmly believe that until we have a proper truth and reconciliation exercise, we're not going to be able to move on. And, we're looking across the pond to you guys now with envy, because we don't have that change of leadership here. We are still mired in the dark days of, an authoritarian mindset, really, which started in the pandemic and hasn't really stopped since.
So you're looking at us and basically hoping that Bobby Kennedy at HHS is really able to uncover some of the corruption and why did we force these mRNA vaccines through and everything else?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the pandemic response was riddled with conflicts, and many of those have not been given any public airing. So, one of the projects we're working on now is a project to unearth and expose some of the conflicts. And, I think I'm quite versed in this. I'm a lawyer by training, and I think I'm quite versed in this, particularly after being completely immersed in it for 5 years. And, we discovered just a few months ago another batch of undisclosed conflicts of running into the tunes of the hundreds of millions of pounds. This is the UK, but people on key government committees in the UK who hadn't thought fit to declare these conflicts. And the whole thing is just so incredibly murky, and still is here.
Are you worried that even if we uncover some of the corruption, which some of it already is being uncovered even before Bobby has really taken over, that it's across every vertical of society, right? So there's the education layer, there's obviously the pharmaceutical layer, there's people got fired that were in private businesses too. Like, there's just so many things that sort of is the insurmountable problem, that to point to something and say, this is how we have to fix it, is almost impossible.
It is. And I think particularly given, of course, the other bodies that it affects is the media. So, media takes money from big pharma, from big tech, from government. And it is a huge machine, really, that is arrayed against the individual, and it makes it incredibly hard to fight. We are trying to fight it, and it's all impossible almost to know where to start. But ultimately, you have to start somewhere, and you have to hope that what is happening in the US will have an impact. I mean, we're in a very interesting position now because it's almost like at least some elements of press in the UK, they don't know what to do, because they can no longer maintain the lie. Like, the truth has got out and the public are not stupid. The public know the truth. And the more the media refuse to even acknowledge that there is another narrative, and actually that narrative is blessed with truth and authenticity in the way that the COVID narrative was not. What do you do about that?
Is part of the problem here also that people just don't want to think about COVID anymore? So as horrible as some of the things that the government did and the media did and whatever anyone lived through personally, or had to, not go to grandma's funeral or get kicked out of a job, whatever all that might be, people just don't want to think about that anymore. It was so much part of our lives for 3 years that they don't want to look back, even if it is to fix it.
I think absolutely. And, it needs a rebrand, really, doesn't it? And I think we need to stop using the term COVID, because it was never really about COVID. It was about freedom. It was about democracy. It was about childhood and the denial of all those things. And I think the other huge elephant in the room is that, here, as in the US, many people were duped at some point or another, whether that's because you were a parent that went along with school closures. I mean, I put my then 6-year-old in front of a screen for 6 hours a day, to the point that she would be coming out of homeschooling, remote learning, saying, "Mum, my eyes hurt, my eyes hurt." So, I did that. Obviously, the vaccine is a whole other layer of, I think we have millions of people who either have taken it themselves and feel maybe concerned but don't want to acknowledge that, or who have seen friends and family who believe they may have been injured by it. And there's this kind of a murder of silence, isn't there? No one really wants to acknowledge the very serious and huge nature of the lies.
One of my theories was the reason that they were going so hard on getting kids vaxxed, even though there was no evidence that kids needed vaccines, is that it was the pressure that it would then put on the parent. That if you were a parent and you got your kid vaxxed, you could never look back and say, boy, it's on me if now my kid has myocarditis or some other neurological disease or whatever it might be. Like, that's a bridge too far for a parent to have to really think about.
It is. And to have to acknowledge that you did that, and that you may have not had all the evidence, you may have, actively shunned some of the evidence because people just didn't want to hear, did they? So, how you get over that is hard. But I think we are, I am very hopeful that Bobby and Jay, I'm very lucky to work quite closely at one point with Jay during the campaign. And and you just have to hope that this will start filtering here. But, I struggle to see how that's going to happen within the current administration here, because they are so opposed to, it seems, some of those values of freedom and free speech.
One of the things that I'm most proud of over these years, because I did not go crazy with COVID, really, and I'm proud to say I'm not vaxxed and my employees are not vaxxed, and I thought it was just insane that I could force my employees to get vaxxed to work for me. It's completely psychotic. But when COVID started, I had Jay Bhattacharya on very early, and because he was a little more calm about everything and sober about everything, that gave me the room to do that. And the fact that he now is going to head up NIH is just absolutely incredible.
It is.
And it's something he could have never imagined even a year ago.
No, it will make for a great Netflix.
Yeah, it really will.
No, it's fantastic. And we wrote in about 2022, myself and my co-founder wrote a book called The Children's Inquiry, and we interviewed Jay at some length for that. And he was fantastic. And he, what he said, and I sure he wouldn't mind me saying it's in the book, he said, it was a form of child sacrifice. What happened, usually we don't sacrifice children to protect adults, but with the pandemic, you don't even have to look to the vaccines for that. School closures, like, that is literally what we did. We shut children's lives down for years so that adults could feel safer. I mean, it's morally abhorrent. And to see, I think most people now would accept, or at least in the UK, I think the school closure argument has been won. I don't think schools will close like that again, certainly not for an illness that is not very dangerous for children themselves. But really, that is the only bit of the argument that I feel has been won. We are nowhere here with free speech. We are nowhere with the vaccines. And in fact, we have the COVID inquiry. We have a big public inquiry happening in the UK at the moment. I say at the moment, it's years. This public inquiry, and it's.
And do you think anything will come out of it that will be substantive?
Worse than that, it is so far. We're about halfway through it. It is proving to be a Orwellian exercise in how one ingrains lies into the history books. So this inquiry, unbelievably, has started from the premise, which you and I know is a completely flawed premise, that the vaccines were safe and effective. So it's not looking at that. It said, the vaccines were tremendously safe, tremendously effective. They were, I think, at one point, the lead lawyer for the inquiry called the vaccine program the promised land. So they've started from that basis.
A vaccine that's literally not a vaccine.
So that would be a heresy. I mean, they have not let any witness who would say anything close to that. They have not even let testimony of those injured by the vaccines be heard directly. They have acknowledged there are vaccine injuries, but it has been very gated. So it's dystopian, because you're going to have this very expensive belts and braces public inquiry, which is going to be held out as a definitive record of truth. And it is a lie. It is founded and grounded in lies.
Where do you think the COVID conversation fits within the broader sort of concept of ARC? Because it hits sort of all of the important points that ARC is talking about individualism first and liberty and freedom and all of those things, and building societies this way instead of this way. But it's not something that is being discussed sort of in every panel down there and everything else.
No, it's not. But in a way, I guess it was just I was going to say small example, but of course it wasn't. It was a very important example. And perhaps it was the first time that to those of us who had not been politicized. So I was in no way a political being. I was
welcome to the party.
Yeah, very lucky, I guess, that politics had never directly impacted my life in a way that meant I felt I had to stand up and scream. And I think it was the first time that many of us realized how fragile the concepts being discussed here this week really are. So we talk about liberty and freedom and free speech as if they are our God-given right, because for many of us, that's all we have ever known, or all we ever had known until 2020. And suddenly they all disappeared. And I think it has left many of us. I mean, I do not believe the UK is a democracy, at least not in the way I would have understood that term in 2018, 2019. It's not. We are using democracy to fight against itself. We're using democratic terms. We must censor the public space to protect the public space. I mean, that makes no sense, does it? So I think the COVID period is very relevant because it really brought the concepts being discussed here now to a wider base, because so many of us were impacted.
Those who give up liberty for safety deserve neither. I'm definitely not the person that came up with that. Well, let's finish with this then. So as you're sitting here with ARC, and as these ideas have woken up someone like you, you must be hopeful that your other countrymen are waking up too, and that even if the inquiries look corrupt and everything else, that what's the hopeful version of the future?
Yeah, the hopeful version of the future is it unites people who would not have found each other, let alone been united, to create a new force, whether that is at grassroots. You have parents on school boards, you have this more active, actually I want to know what my kid is being taught in her classes, because I don't want her being indoctrinated with, whatever it is, gender ideology or, net zero ideology, whatever it is. Or at a higher level, you have new political forces come together. We're seeing that a bit in the UK with the rise of, reform. I hope they won't be the only party. Hopefully we break the two-party diktat that has been very corrosive, I think, of democracy in the last years.
Ironically, I have a bit of a cough, but can I shake your hand?
I would love you to shake my hand.
Thank you.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop screaming, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.